The stars shone brightly through the wide glass windows of the spaceship USS Frontier. Commander Susan Miller stood with her hands behind her back, watching the alien ship approach. The Zalorians had asked for this meeting after humans began settling on planets near their territory. Susan felt nervous but didn't show it. This was her first time meeting aliens. The Zalorians were discovered only 3 years ago, and not much was known about them except that they had been traveling in space for much longer than humans. "They're requesting permission to dock, Commander," said Jack Porter from his station. Jack was young but good at his job handling communications. "Grant permission," Susan said. "Alert security to be present but not threatening. We want to show we come in peace." The Zalorian ship was beautiful, with smooth lines that seemed to flow like water. It was much smaller than the USS Frontier but clearly more advanced. As it docked, Susan straightened her uniform and prepared to meet the aliens. The Zalorian delegation walked onto the ship with a grace that made them seem almost like they were floating. Their skin changed color slightly as they moved, shifting between pale blue and green. They were tall and thin with large eyes that blinked sideways instead of up and down. "Welcome to the USS Frontier," Susan said. "I am Commander Susan Miller, representing the United Earth government." The tallest Zalorian stepped forward. "I am Krall, ambassador of the Zalorian Confederation. We appreciate your welcome." His voice sounded like music, rising and falling in strange patterns. Susan led them to the meeting room where maps of space showed all the planets humans had settled. "We hope to establish friendly relations with your people," she said as they sat around the large table. Krall's skin turned slightly yellow. "That is our hope as well. However, we have concerns about your rapid expansion into space." "We understand," Susan replied. "Humans are explorers by nature. We seek new worlds to settle because Earth became too crowded." "The issue," Krall said, his skin now turning orange, "is that you have settled on 3 planets that were in our future expansion path." This surprised Susan. The planets were uninhabited and showed no signs of any claim. "Those worlds were empty. We found no markers or signals showing they belonged to anyone." "We had not yet placed our markers," Krall explained, "but they were documented in our records for future settlement." Susan tried to be diplomatic. "I don't have the authority to promise we'll leave those planets. Thousands of humans already live there, including many families with children. They've built homes and started farms." Another Zalorian leaned forward. "How many of your kind are on these worlds?" "New Eden has about 10,000 people. Harmony has 7,000, and Prospect has just under 5,000, Susan answered. The Zalorians spoke to each other in their language, a series of musical sounds that the translation computers couldn't fully understand. Susan noticed their skin turning dark purple as they talked. "We must insist that humans leave these worlds," Krall finally said. "They rightfully belong to the Zalorian expansion zone." Susan took a deep breath. "I will communicate your request to Earth, but I must be honest. We won't abandon settlements where people have built new lives. Perhaps we can discuss sharing these worlds or finding other suitable planets for your people." Krall's skin turned a deep red. "Sharing is not our way. These planets were in our plans long before we knew humans existed. But you didn't mark them or settle them," Susan pointed out. "Under Earth space laws, planets belong to those who settle them first. Your laws do not apply to us," Krall said coldly. The meeting continued for hours but made little progress. The Zalorians wanted the planets. Humans wouldn't leave. It seemed like an impossible problem to solve. As the meeting ended, Krall made a final comment that sent shivers down Susan's spine. "We notice your species reproduces slowly and becomes very attached to your young. Such an interesting vulnerability." Once the Zalorians left, Jack turned to Susan with worry on his face. "Commander, did they just threaten our children?" Susan's expression darkened. "I think they did. Send an urgent message to Earth Command. Tell them everything, especially that last comment." Over the next few days, Susan kept the ship on high alert. She ordered extra patrols near the human colonies, especially around schools and family housing. Something about Krall's final words felt dangerous. Her fears proved right 1 week later when an emergency signal came from New Eden. A Zalorian scout ship had entered the atmosphere without permission and was hovering over a park where children were playing. "Set course for New Eden maximum speed," Susan ordered. "Alert all nearby human ships to converge there." As the USS Frontier raced toward the colony, more reports came in. The Zalorian ship had used some kind of beam on several children, lifting them into the air before releasing them unharmed. Then they left quickly. "What were they doing?" Jack asked. "Testing us," Susan replied grimly. "Testing how we'd respond to a threat against our children." When they reached New Eden, Susan found the colony in panic. Parents held their children tightly, afraid to let them out of sight. Colony Security Chief Alan Brooks showed Susan the footage of what happened. "They targeted the children specifically," he said. "Ignored all adults completely." Susan called Earth immediately. "This was no accident. The Zalorians are planning something involving our children. We need to respond strongly before this gets worse." That night, while Susan was discussing options with her officers, a message came through on all channels. The Zalorian voice was calm and clinical. "A simple test. We needed to confirm your species' reaction to threatened offspring. Most illuminating." Susan slammed her fist on the table. "They're treating our children like lab specimens." She didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The real test was still to come, and humanity's response would shock the entire galaxy. News of the incident at New Eden spread quickly. Within days, every human colony was on high alert. Parents kept their children home from school. Playgrounds sat empty. The streets that usually echoed with the sounds of playing children were silent. On Earth, the United Space Command held an emergency meeting. Admiral Richard Hayes paced back and forth as he addressed the gathered military leaders and government officials. "The Zalorians crossed a line," he said. "They deliberately targeted our children to study our reactions, but they didn't harm anyone," pointed out one official. Admiral Hayes stopped pacing and placed both hands on the table. "This time, they didn't harm anyone this time. But their message was clear. They see our children as a weakness they can exploit." On the large screen, they watched the recording from New Eden again, the Zalorian ship hovering over the park, the beam of light reaching down. 6 children frozen in place, floating several feet above the ground. The panic that followed. "We need to send a clear message," said General Linda Martinez. "No one touches our children." The meeting ended with orders to strengthen defenses around all colonies, especially those with large numbers of children. Every ship in the fleet received new instructions to prioritize the protection of young humans above all else. Back on the USS Frontier, Commander Susan Miller received her new orders. Her ship was to patrol the space near New Eden and 2 other nearby colonies. They would be the first line of defense if the Zalorians returned. "Do you think they'll really come back?" Jack Porter asked as they studied the patrol routes. Susan looked grim. "Yes, that was just their first test. They want to see how far they can push us." "Then they picked the wrong thing to test," Jack said. "Nobody messes with human kids." 3 days later, Susan's prediction came true. A fleet of 5 Zalorian ships appeared at the edge of the New Eden system. They made no attempt to hide their approach. "Battle stations," Susan ordered, "and send word to Earth. The Zalorians are back, and they brought friends." The USS Frontier moved to intercept the alien ships, but Susan knew her single vessel wouldn't stand a chance against 5 Zalorian warships. She needed to buy time until reinforcements arrived. "Open a channel," she said. When Kral's face appeared on the screen, his skin was a confident purple color. "Commander Miller, step aside. We wish to continue our research on your colony." Susan kept her voice steady. "That won't be happening, Ambassador. New Eden is under our protection." "You have only 1 ship," Kral pointed out. "We have 5. "Then it will be 1 very busy ship," Susan replied. "But you should know that Earth has issued new standing orders. Any threat to human children will be met with maximum force." Kral's skin shifted to a curious blue. "Fascinating. You would risk war over offspring that are not even your own?" "Every human child is under the protection of every human adult," Susan explained. "That's something your people clearly don't understand." The conversation ended and the Zalorian ships continued their approach. Susan positioned the Frontier directly in their path. "Weapons ready," she ordered. "If they try to reach the planet, we fire everything we have." Minutes passed in tense silence. The Zalorian ships drew closer. Susan's crew prepared for a fight they couldn't win. Then a new voice came over the communication system. "USS Frontier, this is Captain Greg Nelson of the USS Defender. We're entering the system with 4 battleships. Hold position." Relief washed over Susan. Reinforcements had arrived much sooner than expected. Minutes later, 4 human battleships dropped out of faster-than-light travel behind the Zalorian vessels. "Krail," Susan said, reopening the channel. "It seems you're the one outnumbered now." The Zalorians retreated without a fight, but everyone knew this wasn't over. 2 weeks passed. More human ships arrived at all the colonies. On New Eden, military units set up defense systems around schools and family housing areas. Children practiced emergency drills every day. The colony that had once been peaceful was preparing for war. Then Earth made its decision. In a message broadcast across all known space, on every frequency that any alien civilization might monitor, humanity declared its position. To the Zalorian Confederation and all sentient species, humanity has always sought peaceful relations with other civilizations. However, let it be known throughout the galaxy, any species that threatens, harms, or targets human children will face the full, unrestrained might of humanity. We will not issue warnings. We will not accept apologies. Touch a human child, and you'll face extinction. This is not a threat, this is a promise. On New Eden, people gathered in the colony's main square to watch the broadcast. When it ended, Chief Alan Brooks looked at the worried faces around him. "Will it work?" Someone asked. "Will they listen?" Alan wasn't sure. "The Zalorians don't think like us. They don't have the same connection to their young. They may not understand how serious we are." He was right. The Zalorians didn't understand, and they were about to make a terrible mistake 3 days after. Earth's declaration. In the early morning hours on New Eden, alarms blared throughout the colony. Alan Brooks was awakened by the sound of his emergency communicator. "Chief, Zalorian ships have entered the atmosphere, at least 3 of them. They're heading for the school zone." Alan jumped out of bed and grabbed his uniform. "Activate protocol. Shield, get all children to the underground shelters immediately. All adults to defensive positions." As he rushed outside, he saw the Zalorian ships descending through the clouds. They were larger than the scout ship from before. These were warships. All across the colony, parents woke their children and rushed them to the designated shelters beneath the schools and community centers. Teachers and other assigned adults were already there, ready to care for the children while their parents joined the defense. Alan knew they couldn't hold off the Zalorians for long. Their weapons were more advanced, and the colony's defenses were limited. They needed the fleet to respond quickly. As the first Zalorian soldiers emerged from their ships, Alan sent one final message to the orbiting human ships. "New Eden under attack. Zalorians targeting school zones. Help us protect the children." In orbit, Susan Miller received the message. Without hesitation, she gave the order that would change human-Zalorian relations forever. "All ships, descend to atmosphere. Target Zalorian vessels only. Remember the order, they touched our children. Now they face extinction." The space above New Eden filled with ships. Human vessels dropped from orbit, diving toward the colony where Zalorian forces had landed. Commander Susan Miller gripped her chair as the USS Frontier entered the atmosphere at dangerous speed. "Target the largest Zalorian ship," she ordered. "Fire as soon as we're in range." Susan watched on the screen as the colony came into view. Smoke rose from several buildings. 3 Zalorian ships stood in the center of the settlement near the school complex. "They're going after the children," Jack Porter said, his voice tight with anger. "Just like we feared." The USS Frontier fired its main weapons. Bright beams of energy struck the nearest Zalorian ship, tearing through its hull. The other human ships joined the attack. Within minutes, 2 of the 3 alien vessels were heavily damaged. On the ground, the battle was more difficult. Zalorian soldiers had already entered the school buildings. They were searching for the children, not knowing that all young humans had been moved to underground shelters when the attack began. Alan Brooks led a group of colony defenders, blocking the entrance to one of the hidden shelters. They were outgunned by the aliens, but they fought with unusual determination. "Hold the line," Alan shouted. "Don't let them find the shelter entrance." A Zalorian officer approached, his skin glowing red with anger. "Where are the young humans? We know they were here." Alan raised his weapon. "You'll have to kill every adult on this planet to find out." The Zalorian seemed confused by this response. "You would all die to protect offspring that are not even your own?" "Every single one of us," Alan replied. "That's what you don't understand. All human children belong to all of us." The alien's skin shifted to a puzzled blue color. Before he could respond, the ground shook as human ships fired on Zalorian positions around the school complex. In her ship, Susan received reports from the ground. "The children are safe in the shelters," she told her crew. "Now we need to drive these aliens off the planet." She opened a channel to all human ships. "This is Commander Miller. The Zalorians targeted our children. You know the order. No mercy." "What?" Followed, shocked even the human soldiers. Their attack became more than just a military operation. It was like a force of nature. Pilots took impossible risks to destroy Zalorian positions. Ground forces charged enemy lines without concern for their own safety. Adults with no military training joined the fight, using whatever weapons they could find. The Zalorians had never faced anything like it. They had fought wars with other species before, but this was different. The humans weren't fighting to win territory or resources. They were fighting with a single-minded fury that defied normal military logic. 3 hours into the battle, the remaining Zalorian commander called for retreat. His forces had lost half their numbers, and the humans showed no signs of slowing their attack. "Return to the ships," he ordered. "We must report this to the High Council." As the aliens tried to retreat, human forces pressed harder. Susan's ship blocked the escape of one Zalorian vessel. "Surrender or be destroyed," she told them. "Those are your only options." To her surprise, the Zalorian ship fired on her instead of surrendering. The USS Frontier took damage but returned fire with all weapons. The alien ship exploded, lighting up the sky above New Eden. By nightfall, the battle was over. 2 Zalorian ships had been destroyed. One managed to escape, limping away with heavy damage. On the ground, the alien soldiers who survived were taken prisoner. Susan landed her ship and joined Alan Brooks at the main shelter, where most of the colony's children had been hidden. "How many did we lose?" she asked quietly. 23 adults, Alan replied. "But not a single child. We protected them all." The shelter doors opened, and children began to emerge, running to find their parents. Those whose parents had died in the battle were immediately surrounded by other adults, all offering to care for them. Susan watched this with tears in her eyes. This was what the Zalorians had not understood. Human society was built around protecting its young. It wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. 3 days later, Admiral Hayes arrived at New Eden with a fleet of 50 warships. It was the largest human military force ever assembled. "The attack on this colony cannot go unanswered," he told the gathered ship commanders. "We will take the fight to the Zalorians." Susan spoke up. "Sir, they didn't understand what they were doing. They thought our protection of children was a weakness, and now they know it's not," the Admiral replied. "But we need to make sure no one ever tries this again." The human fleet prepared to enter Zalorian space. Their mission was clear: to deliver a message that no species would ever forget. But before they could depart, a signal came from deep space. A single Zalorian ship approached under a flag of peace. It was smaller than their warships, clearly a diplomatic vessel. "This is Ambassador Krell of the Zalorian Confederation," came the message. "We request permission to speak with human leaders." Admiral Hayes allowed the ship to approach but kept weapons ready. When Krall came aboard the human flagship, his skin was a pale white color that no one had seen before. "We have made a grave error," Krall said. Our scientists believed your protection of your young was a strategic weakness. We now understand it is the opposite. You killed 23 people to learn that lesson, Admiral Hayes said coldly. Krall lowered his head. The High Council has reviewed the battle recordings. We have never seen such dedication, such willingness to sacrifice. Our soldiers reported humans continuing to fight with fatal injuries, using their dying moments to protect children who were not even related to them. That's what it means to be human, Susan said. We wish to avoid further conflict, Krall continued. The High Council proposes a treaty. We will recognize all human settlements. We will never again approach any world where human children live. Admiral Hayes studied the alien carefully. Your people tried to use our children against us. That cannot be forgiven easily. We understand now, Krall said, his skin shifting to a deep blue. All species protect their young to some degree. But humans, for humans, it is different. It is your core. We did not see that before. The meeting ended with an uneasy agreement. The human fleet would not attack Zalorian worlds, but the treaty would include the strongest possible language about the protection of children. As Krall departed, he turned to Susan. Your species is terrifying in its devotion. Touch a human, child, and you'll face extinction. We will make sure every civilization in the galaxy understands this truth. The treaty negotiations between humans and Zalorians lasted for 2 weeks. Admiral Hayes led the human delegation, with Commander Susan Miller and Security Chief Alan Brooks attending as witnesses to the New Eden attack. The talks took place on a neutral space station near the border between human and Zalorian space. Krall and 5 other Zalorian officials represented their people. Their skin colors changed often during the discussions, showing their shifting emotions. We propose a buffer zone between our territories, Krall said. No ships from either side may enter without permission. Admiral Hayes nodded. Acceptable, but we require more than that. He pushed forward a document. This is the Children's Protection Accord. It states that no species will ever target, threaten, or endanger the children of any other species. Breaking this law will be considered an act of war against all signatories. Krall's skin turned a thoughtful green. You wish to extend protection to all young, not just humans? All children deserve protection, Susan explained. What happened at New Eden should never happen to any species. The Zalorians spoke among themselves in their musical language. Finally, Krall turned back to the humans. We will sign this accord, but will other species agree to it? They will, Admiral Hayes said firmly. Or they will face the same consequences you nearly did. As the negotiations continued, news of the New Eden battle spread across the galaxy. Many alien civilizations watched the recordings with shock. They saw humans fighting beyond normal biological limits to protect children. They saw adults sacrificing themselves without hesitation. It was behavior that defied logical analysis. On Earth, the public demanded stronger protections for all colonies. The Space Defense Force expanded rapidly, with new ships being built and more soldiers signing up than ever before. At the same time, something unexpected happened. 3 other alien species contacted Earth, requesting to join the Children's Protection Accord. They too had children they cherished, though none protected their young with the same fierce intensity as humans. 4 months after the attack on New Eden, representatives from 12 different species gathered on Earth to sign the accord. It was the largest gathering of alien civilizations in human history. Susan watched from the audience as Admiral Hayes spoke to the assembled delegates. Today we establish a new principle in galactic law, he said. The protection of children transcends all borders, all conflicts, all differences between our species. From this day forward, any civilization that targets the young of another will face united opposition from all signatories of this accord. Many of the aliens present didn't fully understand the human perspective, but they respected the power behind it. They had seen what happened to the Zalorians. None wished to face the same response. After the ceremony, Krall approached Susan. His skin was now a calm blue color. Commander Miller, our scientists have been studying human behavior since the incident. They still struggle to understand the intensity of your response. Is it truly just protection of offspring? Susan thought about how to explain. It's more than that. Every human child represents our future, our hope. When we see a child threatened, we don't just see that individual. We see our entire continuation as a species. Kral nodded slowly. We reproduce differently. Our young are more numerous, less individually important. Every life is important, Susan said firmly. That's what this accord recognizes. As the delegates departed Earth, many felt a shift in the balance of power in the galaxy. Humans were newcomers to interstellar travel, their technology less advanced than many other species, yet their reputation spread quickly. Do not threaten their children. Back on New Eden, the colony was rebuilding. The damaged buildings were repaired. New defenses were installed. Life was returning to normal, though the memories of the attack remained fresh. Alan Brooks stood at the newly rebuilt school watching children play in the yard. Among them were 7 who had lost parents in the battle. They had all been adopted by other colony families without question. A small girl approached him. Mr. Brooks, my teacher said you helped save us from the aliens. Alan knelt down to her level. Everyone helped, Lily. That's what humans do for each other. Will the aliens come back? She asked, her eyes wide with worry. No, Alan assured her. They learned an important lesson. Never mess with human kids. 6 months after the signing of the accord, an unexpected situation arose. A small alien ship entered human space, transmitting distress signals. It belonged to the Vrex, a species not part of the accord. Their ship was damaged and carried several adults and 15 children. The USS Frontier was the nearest vessel. Susan ordered immediate assistance. They're not signatories to the accord, Jack Porter pointed out. We have no obligation to help. Susan looked at him in surprise. They have children on board, Jack. Obligation has nothing to do with it. The human ship rescued the aliens, providing medical care and repairs to their vessel. The Vrex were initially fearful, having heard stories about the fierce humans, but they soon realized their children were being treated with the same care human children would receive. When their ship was repaired, the Vrex captain spoke to Susan. We did not understand the stories we heard. Now we do. Our people will join your Children's Protection Accord. Word of this incident spread as well. More species began to see that human protection extended beyond their own kind. Within a year, the number of signatories to the accord doubled. Admiral Hayes called Susan to his office on Earth after this success. The Zolorians made a terrible mistake attacking New Eden, he said, but perhaps some good has come from it. The galaxy is becoming safer for all children. Susan nodded. They thought our love for our children was a weakness they could exploit. Instead, it became the foundation for a new form of galactic cooperation. As she left the Admiral's office, Susan passed a memorial to those who died defending New Eden. 23 names were engraved in stone. Below them was written, they protected not just their own, but all children yet to come. The message that had started as a warning, touch a human child and you'll face extinction, had evolved into something more. It had become a promise of protection that extended to all young life, everywhere in the galaxy. 10 years passed since the Battle of New Eden. The Children's Protection Accord had grown to include 32 different species from across the galaxy. What began as a human warning had become a foundation for peaceful cooperation between civilizations that might otherwise have been enemies. Susan Miller, now Admiral Miller, stood on the observation deck of Earth's largest space station. She watched as ships from dozens of alien worlds arrived for the 10th anniversary celebration of the Accord. Did you ever think it would grow like this? Asked Jack Porter, who now served as her chief communications officer. Susan shook her head. Never. We were just trying to protect our colonies. We never imagined creating galactic law. The station was filled with representatives from all signatory species. Among them were many children, brought to witness this historic gathering. Human children played alongside young aliens of all shapes and sizes, Despite their physical differences, they shared the universal joy of youth. Kral approached Susan. The Zalorian ambassador had aged, his once bright skin now a more muted blue. Admiral Miller, it is good to see you again. Ambassador Kral. Welcome to Earth Station 1. Kral watched the playing children. Your species changed the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. Before the New Eden incident, many believed humans were weak because of your attachment to your young. Now all understand it is your greatest strength. Susan smiled. We've all learned from each other. Your scientists have helped us understand your perspective too. The Zalorians had indeed changed over the decade. After studying humans, they had begun to form closer bonds with their own offspring. It was a slow cultural shift, but a significant one. In the center of the station, a new monument was unveiled. It showed children of various species standing together. The base was inscribed with words in multiple languages, but the human version read simply, "All children under the protection of all adults." As Susan prepared to deliver her speech at the ceremony, an urgent message came through. A previously unknown species had attacked a Vrex colony. Reports indicated they were targeting areas where young Vrex lived. The celebration paused as representatives gathered to discuss this crisis. The attackers, calling themselves the Kroner, were not signatories to the accord. They had appeared from a previously unexplored region of space. This is exactly what the accord was created for, Susan told the assembled delegates. We must respond, immediately and with one voice. Within hours, ships from 12 different species, including human and Zalorian vessels, were heading to the Vrex colony. It was the first time the military forces of so many civilizations had worked together. Susan led the human contingent aboard her flagship, the USS Unity. As they approached the Vrex world, they detected 7 Kroner warships in orbit. Open a channel to all allied ships, Susan ordered. All vessels prepare to engage. Remember why we are here. We protect all children of all species. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The combined fleet outnumbered and outgunned the Kroner ships. 5 alien vessels were disabled, and 2 attempted to flee but were captured. On the surface of the planet, ground forces from multiple species worked together to push back the Kroner soldiers who had landed. The Vrex children were evacuated to underground shelters, protected by a mixed force of adults from across the galaxy. When the last Kroner soldier surrendered, representatives from the Accord met with their leaders. Susan and Kral stood side by side as they addressed the alien commander. You targeted children, Susan said. Did you not know about the Children's Protection Accord? The Kroner commander, a reptilian being with armored skin, hissed. We knew. We did not believe so many different species would unite to enforce it. Kral's skin flushed red. Then you made the same mistake we once did. You underestimated the resolve of those who protect the young. The Kroner were forced to sign the accord as part of their surrender terms. Their civilization learned the same lesson the Zalorians had a decade earlier. In this part of the galaxy, children were sacrosanct. When Susan returned to Earth, she found Alan Brooks waiting for her. He had retired from colony security and now taught at the academy, training the next generation of space explorers. I heard you handled the Kroner effectively, he said as they walked through a memorial garden planted to honor those who died at New Eden. It wasn't just us, Susan replied. That's the point of the accord. When children are threatened, species that might otherwise be enemies stand together. Alan nodded. I still think about that day sometimes. How close we came to losing those kids. Their sacrifice changed the galaxy, Susan said, stopping at the memorial stone with the 23 names. They didn't die for nothing. In the years that followed, the accord continued to grow. When humans discovered new alien civilizations, the first thing they shared was not technology or resources, but the principles of the Children's Protection Accord. Some species joined willingly, recognizing the wisdom in the agreement. Others, like the Kroner, had to learn the hard way. But the message spread across the stars. All children deserved protection. On the 20th anniversary of the New Eden incident, Susan returned to the colony. It had grown into a thriving city. with humans and aliens living side by side. The HFY school where children had once hidden in shelters was now the largest in human space, with young ones from a dozen different species studying together. As Susan walked through the streets, a teenage girl approached her. "Admiral Miller, my name is Lily. You probably don't remember me, but you helped save me during the attack. I was 6 years old." Susan smiled. "I remember. You were one of the children in the main shelter." Lily nodded. "I'm studying xenodiplomacy now. I want to help strengthen the Accord when I graduate." "It would be honored to have you," Susan said. The Accord started with a warning. Touch a human child, and you'll face extinction. But it's become something greater. Now it's a promise that all children everywhere will be protected. As night fell on New Eden, Susan looked up at the stars. Out there, countless children of countless species slept safely because of what happened here. A terrible attack had led to a greater good. The universe was vast and often dangerous, but in this small corner of it, the most vulnerable were now the most protected, and that was a legacy worth protecting.